Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking with Regina Phelps. Regina, great first segment. Lots of interesting comments there about regional wars and how they impact and what happens when things, well,
Goes
destabilize in
out.
other parts of the
Right.
world. And now we're going to jump to what was the other? Autocratic
Autocratic
alliances.
alliances.
So what did you
Well,
mean by
isn't
that?
that a heavy topic, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure you notice as things have really, as the world seems to be really dividing, dividing between democracies and then these really autocratic establishments. And I think of several, of course. I think of Russia. I think of China, North Korea, which right now are in kind of a trinity of alliances with each other. And they're both, what they're doing is, if you're following kind of like the Russian sanctions after the Ukraine war began, Russia hasn't really suffered at all because places like China is buying all of their oil, North Korea, they're trading things back and forth. And that group of individuals has even gotten stronger. And they're pulling in additional parties, even like India, which is still a democracy, but they're also doing more trading with that part of the world. So that impact, where now again we are seeing a united front of autocratic leaders, and that has a huge impact globally. And I'll give you an example of this. For example, how many things do you think you might have in your house, or that when you go to the grocery store or any place that you buy comes from China?
I would say a lot. A lot.
Yes.
I wouldn't even put a number on it because I know it's either directly there or the parts for it came from there.
Exactly. If it's got 1,000 parts, probably 500 of them came from China. Or even frankly, maybe if only a few of them came from China, if they're critical parts, it's actually a big deal. And I want to give you an example of this. There's one of the industries that is affected worldwide with China is actually pharmaceuticals, because it turns out that many drugs are not necessarily manufactured in China, but the component pieces are. And so there's a company in China right now that the US is considering having very significant sanctions against. It's called Wushu, and it's a drug manufacturer, and they do drug component pieces. And it turns out that like 75% of the drugs have one of their components in it. It's huge in cancer therapy. It's huge in all kinds of drugs. And so you might think, well, I really don't care about autocratic leaders and I really don't care about that. That all of a sudden could be a big issue, because something like that could impact you personally, or maybe
Hmm.
your kid, or a family member, or a good friend. And I think that's another important piece, is that when we look at this destabilization of the world, and then you add in this autocratic leaders now beginning to form their own groups, and they're fairly strong, and they have a lot of influence and power. And in particular, because one of them happens to be China, we all consume so much from there. I mean, just walk through a business, go look at your supply chain, and tell me what you didn't buy that didn't have a piece or part that came from China.
Yeah.
What the hell would happen to us from a continuity and resilience perspective if indeed we could not purchase items from that country easily?
Yeah. It would not look well for a lot of organizations. Manufacturers would struggle.
Right.
Uh, and part of that too is um, those supply chains, they will be impacted because those parts come with other parts.
Right.
So, okay, we're not giving you those. Oh, well, then that means you don't need these. So now something else gets impacted because
Right.
they all come on, these big, huge ships. You're ordering all these different parts, and they all come together in one area, and then they all leave, Shanghai or Hong Kong or wherever in the world, really. And if there's something happening there, then you're going to impact other areas as well now.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
the thing too with the Russia, China, and North Korea is they're all connected. They're
Absolutely.
not separate around the globe. They're all connected, and you can add Iran to that as well.
Right.
There's
Exactly.
other few
Exactly.
others there, so they can move about as well. And that's a huge land mass and amount of population.
Right. And a
People.
lot of influence, a lot of power, a lot of
Yeah.
resources.
Yes. I actually checked this up. Russia is the largest country in the world. That I already
Right.
knew. China,
Geological.
depending on the numbers that get used, China is 3 or 4, and the United States becomes 3 or 4, depending on how they do it.
Right, how you carve it. Right.
Iran is 17, and North Korea is 97, and there's 195 countries in the world.
Right.
So 4 of them are in the top 10 already.
Right.
So, that's not looking good.
Right.
That
Right.
that's a risk. There is impact there, whether you
Right.
know it or
Absolutely.
not.
Absolutely. And so I think, again, us as resiliency professionals, we need to always keep thinking and paying attention to this and not just tuning it out like that has nothing to do with me, because it could have a huge impact on us. And we should not be thinking that it doesn't. We need to be thinking about, well, if that was to happen, what would I do? Now, I mean, the rest of the world would be in the same spot, but that also means the competition for whatever the replacement piece or part is would be furious.
Mhm. Yeah,
So I think it's an important thing for us to consider. And as these autocratic leaders are growing closer together, the impact to all those democratic purchasing countries are going to be much more significant. So we need to be thinking about, I hope we have plan A and B and C for when we are able to purchase from some of those entities.
yeah. And our
Right?
organizations think if we can't sell to those entities,
Right.
sometimes there's the impact going the other way as well, not just the stuff you
Absolutely.
buy from them, but the stuff they're buying from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think it's really important for us to be broad in our thoughts about that.
Yeah.
And when you look at that issue of these conflicts around the world, and then you toss in these autocratic leaders, now there might be a tendency to say, well, gosh, I live in a democratic nation, so why should I be worried about that? I'm thinking about both Canada here and the United States. But there's lots of reasons why you might want to be worried or thinking about it, right? And so this gets to the real civil unrest that we're seeing in the United States and the sheer amount of anxiety in relationship to the election and other things going on. And I mean, it's not just the people in the United States that are concerned about the election. I think everybody in the world is concerned about the election and the impacts that it could have. And
Yeah.
I think, right, it's on people's mind. And I think that makes 2024 a great anxiety provoking year. And I know, as we've talked about before, 2024 is the biggest election year in the history of the planet. So it's not just the US that's having elections, it's many places. And so there could be lots of shifting and moving. Now, there's some places having elections, of course, where it doesn't really matter. And that's places like Russia. When, Putin was just reelected, that wasn't really an election, I don't think, but,
Yeah.
not certainly a democratic one. But still, that kind of anxiety is palpable. And here in the United States, I've had many of my clients who are really concerned about what will happen in the election and also what will happen societally because of the election. And so that's put a lot of people thinking about things such as the concept of civil war. And I think maybe you and I have talked about that briefly here, hither and yon, but it's actually a big deal. And in many of my clients, they are anxious, is a great way to describe it. And so, interestingly enough, a film just came out here in the United States, and I may be in Canada too yet, I don't know.
Yes, it is.
And it's called Civil War. And so I thought to be provocative, we would play the trailer just to see a look at it. But what I want to talk about is that what the director really's intention was, apparently, I heard him interviewed about this, in making this film, was to talk about not so much the fact that, oh my God, that this could happen, which of course it could, but the idea is to actually see what it could look like if it did begin to happen. And the idea that hopefully it would repel so many people to see what that word means in this contemporary day, that they would actually work hard to make sure that it didn't happen.
Right.
So, I mean, that's sort of the positive spin on how you look at this particular topic. But on that note, what I want to do is I want to play this and see. It's kind of a little creepy, and I apologize for that, but it'll give us something to sort of chew on here.
States have seceded.
The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president assures the uprising will be dealt with swiftly.
Let me know if you want to try anything on.
Are you guys aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America?
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
Citizens of America.
The so-called Western forces of Texas and California
Have suffered a very great defeat at the hands of the United States military.
Mr. President, do you regret the use of airstrikes against American citizens?
They're moving to D.C. today.
You need to go down there.
They shoot journalists on sight in the Capitol. Every instinct in me says this is death. Blooded.
Every time I survived a war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home. Don't do this. But here we are.
There's some kind of misunderstanding here. What? Well, you're American, okay?
Okay. What kind of American are you? You don't know?
The Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th.
Oh my God.
Get in the car! Get in the car!
Move, move, move!
You're gonna hang back.
I'm not hanging back.
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go, 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 go!
God bless America.
That's a little heavy, isn't it?
Yes. And unfortunately, it's the kind of thing that we're actually hearing about now.
Right,
Even from politicians
right. Yes,
are saying this kind of thing. So it's, and I don't mean like, hey, this might happen. This is, we should do this.
right, right.
What kind of message is that sending your colleagues, your friends, your families, your fellow citizens, countrymen, whatever word you want to use?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think in some ways, when I first heard this film was going to be made, I thought it was actually it would encourage people, and perhaps it might, I don't know. But I also think what it does do is it shows people what it would look like. And I think in some ways that might be helpful to actually get people like, wake up! What are you thinking about? But I have clients that are actually asking us to what would we do if we indeed actually had, versions of this in different parts of the US. And in my many years of practice, I'll have to be honest with you, Alex, I never thought I'd be asked to do that.
Yeah. I never thought that we'd have these kind of conversations, that as a contingency planner, one of the things I would have to think about or even consider
Right,
is civil unrest on such a large scale.
right,
Yes, I've been through situations where there were demonstrations,
protests, of course. Right.
I worked in events and things like that, and I worked in downtown Toronto. There were world leaders there. There's all kinds of embassies in downtown Toronto, or satellite offices. I forgot not embassies, but I forgot what they call the offices that are there as well. And there's
Consulates.
That's the word I'm trying to think of. Yes. So other places like that and demonstrations. These streets are closed off for a demonstration. So I'm used to that kind of a thing, but not when people start turning around saying, "Oh, we should overthrow the government," or these kind of things. I was like, "What? What did you say?"
Right. No, absolutely. And I think, again, what I would say is that in our planning, in our process, I think we should not be flat-footed as a profession, and that we need to be thinking about what would happen if this was starting to go on in different parts of our country, of the United States. Not that it would be in your city or town necessarily, but if all of a sudden it did begin to erupt in certain parts of the country, what would that mean?
Yeah.
What would you do? How would that impact your business? How could you keep your employees safe? Blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah.
And it doesn't have to be big. It could be
Right.
starting
It could be-
somewhere. It's fear that spreads. And when fear takes hold, watch out.
Right, right. So I think we as a profession need to think about this and not be like, blind and put our head in the sand.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to look at it because it is real events and things that are happening, and it's not hypothetical.
Right.
This talk is really going on.
Right.
You had January 6th a few years ago.
Right.
It's things like that are really happening.
Right.
So
on that note, we should take a break.
Yeah, on that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We're talking with Regina Phelps about uncertain times. We will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.